Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Sometimes parents do things so stupid that they should be prosecuted. I'll have more on that in just a moment. Ordinarily, I like to let people figure out what the moral of the story is for themselves, but I'm not going to bury the lead on this one. The issue is, specifically as it relates to these two cases, is that sometimes parents, with the best of intentions, buy their children very expensive performance sports cars as graduation gifts from high school, sometimes even college. That's not a good idea. We'll get into that here in just a second, but it's just never a good idea because at 18, a child has not made enough bad decisions to have obtained good judgment. Because that's what good judgment comes from. It comes from making bad decisions and having to live with the consequences. So today we're going to talk about two individuals. One of them is a gentleman by the name of Herrin, and the other is a guy by the name of Johnston Taylor. And we're going to talk about a couple of tragedies that involve the taking of 4 lives. Now, there have been people who have claimed that in both of these cases it's just a tragic accident. And while I can certainly see that to an extent in these cases, there's more to it than that. Let's talk about Herrin first of all. Cameron got a brand new Mustang sports car for graduation. He had it 2 days. In the 2 days that he had it, he went, among other speeds, up to 162 miles per hour. 162 miles per hour in a sports car. Remember what I said about 18-year-olds not having good judgment? No 18-year-old has seen enough of the world to know what happens to you when you're going 162 miles an hour and you lose control. Because no 18-year-old ever thinks they are going to lose control. Well, this accident happened when he was only going 102 miles per hour. And I say only, a little bit tongue-in-cheek there. He was on Bayshore Boulevard in Tampa, doing 102, racing another man, another kid about the same age, and a young mother started to cross the street with her child in a little stroller, and Mr. Herrin couldn't stop in time and killed them both. Now let's talk about Johnston Taylor. Mr. Taylor was coming back from a day at Lake Martin down U.S. Highway 280 just north of Auburn. And he had turned off onto the University Boulevard, which runs to the, to the south and east, south and west of Auburn University. He's coming down University Boulevard going 92 miles an hour, never applies the brakes, and plows into the back of a car driven by Rod Bramblett with his wife, Paula Bramlett. Now, Rod Bramblett may be a name you know. You may remember him from this clip.
He'll run it out to the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis.
Oh, my God.
Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
Mr. Bramlett was killed. Mrs. Bramlett was killed instantly. Mr. Bramlett lingered for a couple of hours. Much the way Herrin's the mother died instantly and the child lingered for a couple of hours. But in both cases, there were 2 people killed. Both of these young men sought what is called youthful offender status. Now, youthful offender status is designed to give a kid a little bit of consequence so that he develops some good judgment. He strays once and he doesn't reoffend again. Generally speaking, I think it's a good program. I think it gives judges a tool to rehabilitate somebody who may have good intentions and be generally a good person, but who made a very bad mistake. In Mr. Herrin's case, the person that he was racing pled guilty to vehicular homicide. And much like Herrin, he did not have any serious criminal history, and he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Now, when you're 18 or 19 years old and you're sent to the adult prison for 6 or 7 years, that is a serious punishment. He didn't get youthful offender status. He got sent to prison for 6 years. And he will remember every day of that 6 years for the rest of his life, no question. But it wasn't what I would call a slap on the wrist, but he also was not the person that hit the young woman. He was involved in a conspiracy to go racing, and as a result, he was liable for that murder, or that death. It wasn't a murder. But he was not as culpable as Mr. Herrin. Also, his lawyer negotiated a plea for him. And as a result of a negotiated plea, he was sentenced within the range that he negotiated. Mr. Herrin's lawyer did what was called an open plea, which basically throws him on the mercy of the court. Now, to get into a little bit of this, not only did the parents give him this car, but they paid for the lawyer, and I also know that they wanted to allow him to drive. They got permission from the court for him to visit with his friends prior to his conviction. Now, if his friends want to visit him, they have to go to the prison. But they got him out of jail on bond and allowed him to go different places. That's 2 things that his victims never got. So it was easy to see that Mr. Herrin had a bit of privilege. But the privilege evaporated when he was sentenced. Although he asked for youthful offender status, the judge said, based on the severity of the crime, there will be no youthful offender status. The range of punishment was between 18 years in prison and 30 years in prison. And Mr. Herrin got 9 years for the mother and 15 years for the daughter, and he was sentenced consecutively, so that the 15 years does not begin to run until the 9 years has run completely. Now, the reason that's important is because it has some effect on when he can seek parole. He likely will not do a full 24 years in jail, but he will do a long time. And I suspect what the judge had in his mind was sending a message with this. Now, almost immediately, and you can find these out on YouTube, if you Google his name, Cameron Herrin, you can find these out on YouTube, all the YouTube and TikTok videos that say this is an unjust sentence. Well, he only has to do 24 years in prison at the most, and his victims will never walk among us again. I don't think it was an inappropriate sentence. And I would point out that the appeal went to the Florida Court of Appeals, and it affirmed the trial judge without even writing an opinion. So that tells you what they thought of the claim that the sentence was unjust. So, I want to contrast that case with what happened in the Rod and Paula Bramlett deaths. Now, you'll recall that I mentioned that this is designed to give somebody an opportunity to do better. In this case, even before the trial, this 16-year-old was arrested and cited for speeding and driving recklessly for several weeks, and that was after the crash that killed the Bramletts. It looked to me like it was unlikely that he was going to learn any lesson from being sentenced as a youthful offender. In that case, Johnston Taylor was given youthful offender status. The maximum amount of time he could serve in an incarceration was 3 years. And because of the youthful offender status law in Alabama, the exact nature and time of his punishment are sealed and are not available to the general public. Nobody knows. He could very well be out right now, and no one would know that, except maybe his parents and his friends. But the bottom line is, the judge in that case opted to give him the youthful offender status. And I believe that that was probably an abuse of discretion, but that's why we give judges discretion. And since I'm not privy to all the facts in the case, I really can't say whether or not it was an abuse of discretion, although it tends to feel as though it was one. So again, coming back to sort of the moral of the story on this, if you love your children, don't give them the means to harm other people. Don't give them the means to run somebody down because they lack good judgment at 18. I know I was a boy once at 18. As hard as that is to believe, looking at me now, I was a boy at 18, and I had terrible judgment. So, if you've enjoyed this, I'd really appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, and do all the things that all the YouTubers ask you to do every time. If you haven't already, please go over here and subscribe to our channel and tap on that notification bell so you can be notified whenever we release a video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.